If you're a man and you live in the US and you want to find the right girlfriend or wife, you may have been confronted with this idea of passport bros. What are passport bros? Passport bros is this idea that full-grown adults travel to Latin America or other places in the world, perhaps Eastern Europe, because they believe it's easier there to find the right woman, perhaps with conservative values. Let me tell you something, that's an absolutely nonsensical idea, because I've seen it over the years with clients from 32 countries who've come to me after they've tried nonsense like that. Because if you can't hold a frame in a conversation, if you can't create attraction in an interaction with a lady in Connecticut, in New York, in LA, then you definitely won't be able to do that in Mexico City either. Now, you might get the white guy bonus, where the initial attraction might be better, and you might get laid easier initially, but I've seen it so many times where men, they end up in relationships where they're being whipped. They're being whipped because, you know the stereotype of like Latin American women? Well, they can end up in their masculine quite quickly if you don't show up in your masculine. So don't just think that just because you can travel to other countries, it's going to get easier. Because you have to understand that culture came way later than the basic operating mechanisms that dictate our brain. Our biology, how we as human beings relate to one another, that's hundreds of thousands of years old. People argue that we as human beings lived in tribes around 300,000 years ago of 100 to 200 people. And that's where a lot of these dynamics were created. And so what really creates attraction has been the same and is the same regardless of culture. Obviously, cultural nuances play a role. But look, I'm not political, but let's say you're looking for a woman who has slightly more conservative values, or who at least is loyal, is truly grounded in her feminine. You might say, well, I can't really find any of them here in the US. And you might be looking to Latin America. Well, first of all, you have to understand that half of the population in the US is female. Okay, that's 150 million women. 10% of them are in the right age group for you. That's 15 million. There's 15 million women in the US alone. You only need one. You don't need millions of them. You need one. Whatever belief you might have right now as to why you can't find the right one with the right values in the US, in a country like that, it's just an excuse. Because the fact of the matter is that other people have done it, and if they have done it, you can do so too. Now, they might come up with excuses. Other people have less money than me, and women only want me for my money. Other people have more money than me. Other people are better looking. They have more hair. They have less hair. It's all nonsense. If somebody who's somewhat like you has done it, then you will be able to do the exact same thing. And if you can think you can travel to just Eastern Europe, well, that won't help you either. Because you might get the initial attraction factor, but to find somebody for a relationship on eye level, you have to change your communication. Yes, you might get the initial attraction, as I said earlier, but you're going to end up in a relationship where you'll lose your soul. Because remember, if you don't learn to communicate your needs on eye level, if you don't build attraction, then you will eventually end up feeling a shell of yourself. Your self-esteem will plummet. I realized that in the relationship with my ex-wife. It's not even that she's a bad person or anything, but I was so scared of losing her that I didn't communicate my needs. And if you don't stand up for what's right, if you don't stand up for what's important to you, if you don't set boundaries, then you will slowly but surely, day by day, week by week, month by month, start feeling weaker and weaker and weaker until eventually you will have symptoms. For some, that might be anxiety, stress. For others, it's going to be anger and frustration. But these negative emotions that you're experiencing, they're really just a competence. They're really just a symptom that your underlying needs aren't being met. But your needs can't be met by her if you don't communicate them. And there's a lot of boundaries that you're not setting in the initial stages. On the first date, boundaries have to get set. So are there amazing women in Latin America? Of course. Are there amazing women in Eastern Europe? Of course. But the fact of the matter is that in almost all countries, you can find somebody who's right for you. And if you live in Europe or the US, you have more than enough. And it's really just about how you present yourself. Do you use online dating? Are you going out there to meet women in person? Are you able to start a conversation out of nothingness? And it's funny, I was interviewed by Dubai Eye Radio almost 2 years ago, and I was saying to the lady, most men think they're good at two things. Most men think they're good at fighting, and they think they're good at talking to women. I'm not a professional fighter, but I train karate for 6 years, 4 to 7 times a week. Give the average guy a pair of boxing gloves, and he's so instantaneously, monumentally fucked, it is so hilarious. Ask 99% of men who are not on alcohol or other drugs to do an approach during the day or at night that's calibrated, where you can actually create emotions, emotional spikes, be entertaining, not an entertainer, but be entertaining enough to create attraction. They can't do it. Could you do it? Absolutely. But would you? That's a different story. You could do all these things, but you won't. But I'd like to encourage you to understand that what it takes to get out there and change your communication, build the confidence, understand the dynamics is not even that crazy. It's not even that dramatic of a process. So many people have done it. Percentage-wise, very few people have done it. Because if you look around, how many people do you actually know that are in fulfilling relationships? Not just a relationship, but in fulfilling relationships. Very few. So percentage-wise low, but the total amount is still great. It's not about you becoming somebody completely different. It's just about understanding that you have a certain target audience. Figure out what are your must-haves. Write a list. Write several pages today of what your ideal life partner, your ideal wife would look like. Not just physically, but in terms of her personality, her values. What would life be like together? Write that down. And then also differentiate between what are must-haves and what are nice-to-haves. Okay, these things, I really must have them. And if one of them isn't there, it's a deal breaker and it's already done. But on the other hand, these are nice to haves. I would like her to XYZ, but these aren't necessary. So I'm okay with never getting my nice to haves, but I must have my must haves. And then you write down your deal breakers. Now you might say, well, my deal breakers, aren't they just the opposite of my must haves? In a way, yeah, but usually when I ask clients to write down their deal breakers, they come up with much more than just the opposite of must-haves. And inversely, once you write down exactly what you don't want, you become much more clear on what you do want. So for example, if she's easily offended, she is a feminist, whatever, all these types of things that might be deal breakers for you, you write them down, and then you can screen for your target audience. And the way you attract those people is not just magically visualizing and manifesting. No, you have to start taking strategic action, and you have to present yourself in an attractive fashion on dating apps and in person. And then, core element, as we've spoken about plenty of times, you have to communicate way more radically honestly. You have to be perfectly fine with losing the wrong people. I made a reel about this, or we published a reel about this, a little snippet from a seminar that we posted, that we did a month ago or so. A whole day, 9-hour seminar in Dublin was amazing. So we posted a little snippet of that yesterday on Instagram where I talk about exactly that, where I talk about the fact that most men, they're trying to make it work with people. You're trying to make it work. Once you just stop trying to make it work and you realize that if you have actual compatibility with male best friends as well as with women, it will just flow. Now, that's not to say that you can't improve your communication skills. You should learn about things like nonviolent communication by Marshall Rosenberg. Because as much as you want to be radically honest, you also have to be measured, because you can't have zero filters. You want to have as little filters as humanly possible, but you can't have zero because you're going to become offensive. So you do want to educate yourself on that subject matter. But overall, if you're with people that you're actually compatible with, it'll just flow, right? If you're starting a business, if you want to learn to get good at talking behind the camera, for example, the right friends, they will always encourage you. If you're trying new things, and I'm not talking about drugs or some pussy habits, but if you're doing something that's actually good for you, the right woman and the right male friends, they will encourage you. And you can tease somebody. I was talking to the clients about that yesterday, actually, the difference between somebody making fun of you in a warm, loving way and somebody making fun of you in a way where they're trying to harm you. And you feel their intent. The second somebody has the slightest bit of ill intent, fuck them. Get rid of them. They're not your friends. If your friends don't make you feel good, they are not your friends. Same with the woman. Like, there are men who are treated horribly. There's a story. I'm going to keep it short. There was a girl who once told me a story about two of her friends, a guy and a girl. She was friends with both of them separately, individually. And the guy, I met them all. The guy, amazing guy. The girl, also really nice and educated. Really educated people in Canada. And they were... we basically went for dinner together, and afterwards she told me that story that, this was many, many years ago. She told me that this guy, when they have sex, she forces him to come in a towel because she doesn't like cum. Think about that. She doesn't like cum at all, so she forces him to come in a towel. How much more demasculating does it get? I'll tell you exactly how much more demasculating it gets. It was this guy's birthday party. And they were all on the first floor. And for some reason, he just breaks through the floor, bam, lands on the ground floor on his ass. And he's sitting there in pain. Everybody's worried. One person is laughing, his girlfriend. She's standing there laughing at him. And this dude starts crying. think about how broken of a man, not fully broken because you can't break, but think about how much suffering this man has to go through to sit there on his ass in front of his people and cry. How much humiliation does one man have to take to break down semi-publicly like that? So what I'm trying to say here is, dating is not only a really, really fun process, and it is a lot of fun, but it's a very meaningful process as well. Because if you don't learn to set boundaries and stand up for yourself and communicate in a masculine way, which allows her to show up in her feminine, you will end up suffering. The alternative is not just, oh yeah, it'll be fine, I'll just meet somebody at some point. Well, you're going to meet somebody, but if you don't communicate your needs, if you don't become aware of the social dynamics, she will lose respect for you. And she might cheat on you. Or at the very least, she'll get a wandering eye. And she'll start bickering you for little things. Because the frame is fucked. So what I would like to encourage you is look around where you are right now. Now, if you're in a small town of 20,000 people, somewhere in Alaska, well, maybe you'll just have to move, okay? But if you're in a city with 100,000 people or 200,000 people and you get a couple of those around you, you are fine, okay? You can use dating apps, you can drive to cities around you. There's plenty of options that you have available to yourself if you live in a country, for example, like the US or in places like Europe. The opportunities are there. Stop making excuses, put yourself out there, communicate way more radically honestly, which is a mechanism for screening for compatibility, and then just let things flow. Wish you all the best. Take care.